So I went with my team to a tournament this weekend, and it was an 8-man teams tournament, and we got annihilated. Man, we got smashed into the absolute ground. It was probably the worst curb stomping I've ever experienced in 40k, and it was absolutely awesome because we learned so freaking much about the new meta. So I'm going to break a bunch of lessons down so that everyone can take from it. This isn't only going to be tailored towards teams. This is going to be talking about singles as well. It kind of doesn't matter what army you are running as well. So just tune in. We got a bunch of freaking details in this video. So I'm going to really cover three big lessons that we as a team kind of gathered from this past weekend. One was there's going to be stuff about the new chapter approved, especially that has challenger decks and how they're really having a very dramatic effect on the game. And I do not think it's a negative effect either, but it is dramatic. Then there's going to be insane differences in strategy when you're talking about teams versus singles. And some people just, it's really hard to understand that unless you've experienced it. So I'm going to do it in a way that everyone can understand it. And then 3, improving in the new season of Warhammer 40,000, because Pariah Nexus is gone. It is the new season of Warhammer 40k. We have a new chapter approved. I think if you're watching this video today, it is the 3rd of June. So I believe the decks are officially released on the 7th of June, but everything's been leaked. So we were playing with the new rules. All right, so let's just do a quick rundown for you of what the event was, and then I'm going to be going into all these details. So this was a WTC prep. For those of you who don't know what the WTC is, it is the World Teams Championship, and this year it is going to be taking place in the beginning of August in Leoben, Austria. And it's a new location, but every single year the WTC is the largest teams tournament in the world and is the pinnacle of competitive 40,000, Warhammer 40,000. So basically what they do is they take 8-man teams from every country who chooses to join, and it's going to basically be the 8 best players from each country. It's not really that simple. Sometimes you have people who really just only like playing in a singles mindset or can't dedicate the time that teams requires of them. So, but you can pretty much be expecting that you're playing the top 1% of players in every single country there. So it is a absolute Shark Tank. So for the last 3 years at the WTC, Team Norway, which is the team that I play on, has been, because I live in Norway. I'll be moving to the States, eventually, or back to the States eventually, but we're currently in Norway. So I've been here for the last 2 years. This will be my 3rd year with Team Norway. So for the last 3 years, the first year I was not part of it, Norway has actually dramatically improved in their placings every single year. We went from tier 4 to tier 3 to tier 2 for this year. Let me briefly explain what that is. There's a lot of teams who are there. So what they do is, overall, the tournament is 7 rounds long, but the first 3 rounds they do in what's called a pod phase. So they'll divide they'll divide the countries into tiers. So a seed 1 tier, a seed 2 tier, a seed 3 tier, and a seed 4 tier. So some of the favorite to wins, some of the guys who are really good, some of the guys who are okay, some of the guys who are generally newer to that. And so they make sure that in your pod phase, everyone plays everyone, and it's generally an advantage for the better teams, making sure that they don't get knocked out in the first round of the tournament because you have Team America versus Team Poland in round 1, because that would dramatically make sure that the guys who might be going to the finals might not be able to make it. So anyway, that's what we mean by tier 4, tier 3, tier 2, right? So we went from tier 4 to tier 3, and then because of our great performance last year, we jumped from tier 3 to tier 2 for this year. If you guys don't know how teams work, it just means that everyone on the team has to play a different army. So you can't have 2 guys on Chaos Space Marines, for example. So everyone has to be a different army. And this year, what we've done in our own team composition for teams Warhammer 40,000 is we have had a dramatic shift in our team. 4 of our veteran players have not rejoined us for this year due to varying reasons, and we've had 4 brand new players, and we actually just recently had a very unexpected shift in leadership due to life circumstances. So there was a lot of new stuff happening for us, and we had a great weekend, and we learned a ton that is really going to aid us going into this year WTC, which is where I'm going to basically be sharing with you guys. So this was the Nordic Masters. It was an event. It was an invitational 8-man teams tournament. And there were 6 countries who were invited with extremely high-level competition. So 2 of the top 5 teams in the world were there. And then everyone else who was there is either a tier 2 or the top of tier 3 that were able to play. So if you guys don't know how WTC or teams scoring in general works, it's done on a victory points differential. So I have the chart here for you guys. So if there is a 0 to 5 differential in game points, let's say someone had 85 points and the other person had 80 points, that is going to be a draw for teams purposes. So each each person would get 10 game points, or 10 match points, you would call it. Now, for every differential of 6 or more, then you're going to have a match point attributed to you. So if you happen to win, and because you play 86 victory points and your opponent gets 80 victory points, you're going to get an 11-9 win, and so on and so forth, whereas a 20-0 win would be you had more than 50 victory points advantage. So in teams, a lot of times what happens is you will position yourself not only just to get really big wins, but sometimes you'll position yourself specifically to stop other armies that might expect to get big wins. It gets very, very complicated. But anyway, last year we performed really well. We had 2 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. This year we had 5 losses, and I personally went 1 win, 1 draw, and 3 losses. And this was probably the lowest performance that I have ever had in a tournament in my entire life. And it was really, really fascinating. And a lot of us really just learned some super valuable lessons. So first things first, about the new meta. Let's talk about this. We had the new chapter approved, and this really, really does change quite a bit of stuff. Some of the new missions, which I'm going to have to do videos in depth on to help get you guys prepped for, have actually changed. So terraform, for example, it's actually an amazing mission to go first on, because if you terraform, then you get the objective terraformed, and your opponent, if they terraform, then they will unterraform it for you. This gives the person who goes first generally a really, really big advantage if they have an army that can, say, terraform 2 to 3 objectives in turn 1. Challenger cards, and there's other differences in some of the other matchups which are really, really important as well. Challenger cards are dramatically going to be changing the way this game is played, especially in singles, but definitely in teams as well. Just as an example, I had a game where I was playing into a Star Shatter army with my orcs, which is typically a huge win for me. But there was a really interesting build within the Star Shatter list that kind of changed the way the matchup worked. So I had it estimated as a draw, and I'll explain what I mean by that in my next slide. But I was actually going to be winning with an 11-9, meaning I was winning by more than 6 victory points, I think, or by 6 or more victory points. And I think I was winning by 6 victory points. But because of the way I had my lead, every single round, my opponent actually was able to draw a challenger card because he was trailing by 6 or more victory points, which means over the course of the game, he actually got 12 bonus victory points just from his challenger cards, which is absolutely wild. And that swung the game from a 11-9 win for me to a 9-11 loss for me. So these challenger cards are actually a huge deal in the new game, and if we are not prepared to deal with them, it's going to actually cause a lot of problems. So I'll definitely be doing videos in the future on how to actually optimize your challenger cards. But just as a little tip, if you have the opportunity to not give your opponent a challenger card, like if you see what the score is and you go, oh, I could score this card and it would give me, oh, I don't know, 7 victory points, or maybe I don't want to score this card and that's going to give me only a 5-point lead over my opponent. Because with a 5-point lead, your opponent will not get to draw a challenger card in the next battle round. But with a 7-point, they will. Sometimes it's actually better to score less so that they don't get the challenger card, which is kind of a very odd thought process to us. But it's very, very interesting things. Now, I personally do believe the challenger cards are a little too easy to score. Or a little too easy to draw. I think it would be much better if you only get to draw if there's an 8 victory point differential instead of a 6. But, that's just a personal opinion. Overall, I like the mechanism. It's just going to require some training for us to get used to it. So basically, you're going to really need to focus on denying the challenger cards in 40k for this new season. So pay attention to that. You've got other primary missions, like hidden supplies, for example, which is holding your home field doesn't score you any victory points, except if it gives you more objectives than your opponent. So the way you would score in hidden supplies is you score 1 for holding an objective in no man's land, you score 2 for holding 2 objectives in no man's land, and then you score 5 victory points for holding 1, you score 10 victory points for holding 2, and then you will score an additional 5 if you hold more objectives in general than your opponent. So holding your home field in that mission is only valuable when you hold more than your opponent, which makes you want to not really hold it and dedicate all your units to the field, but then you also kind of have to hold it so that you can potentially hold more than your opponent. It's a really, really interesting mechanism. So I'm going to have to do videos on Challenger specifically, all of the new primaries as I get more reps on them. But these things are absolutely changing the game. So be aware of the fact that you're going to have to play a little bit differently. Another thing which I didn't include on the slide is that some of the secondaries have changed. So we actually will start deploying a little bit differently now than we used to in the old Pariah Nexus. For example, you no longer need to deploy units to be able to score containment for you turn 1 because there's no containment anymore. So you don't have to worry about having units in position to do that for you. So just be aware of that. It's actually is a big difference. Now, let's talk about how teams are very different from singles. So in singles leagues, in singles tournaments, you really have two options. You have an option of building just a balanced list that's ready for anything. And then you have an option of building a list that is a problem that everyone else is going to have to be ready for. Now, in teams, generally speaking, almost every list, in quotation marks, almost every list is going to be more of one of these lists that is a problem for other armies to have to solve. Because you don't really need balance in teams because there is a pairing process, which maybe I'll go over very briefly for you, that will allow you to kind of manipulate who plays who. So for those of you who don't know, the pairing process is there's 8 teams. Both teams will select a defender. So they'll put a card face up, which is like, hey, this is my first defender. Each team will then select 2 attackers. So if I'm TA and you're team B, I have my defender on, and you will hand me your 2 attackers. I will select which one of these armies that I want to fight with my defender. So if I put Imperial Knights down as my first defender, and you attack me with Sisters of Battle, and you attack me with Leagues of Votann, I will get to choose, do my Imperial Knights fight the Leagues of Votann or fight the Sisters of Battle? So there's a pairings process, and the ones that get refused go back into the deck and it gets shuffled. And I'm not going to go into more detail than that as of right now. But there is a way of determining who plays into who. You get to choose who you attack with, and you get to choose which attacker you fight. So anyway, your army doesn't need to be able to handle everything in teams. Your army actually doesn't even need to be able to win any matchup because of the way that teams work. Sometimes you might have a broken army. So for example, Death Guard currently are easily the strongest army in the game, and they are way overtuned. So in a singles perspective, you might just be screwed if you run in a Death Guard. But in a teams, we might not mind because we have an army that's specifically designed to only lose by a very small margin to Death Guard. And that's its entire purpose in the team. Because now Death Guard can't get their team like a huge win. They get a very small win, which changes their entire predictions for how the round is going to go. It's very, very interesting. So armies will have a very specific purpose in teams. Hey, this demons list job, their entire purpose of this demons list is to kill Tau, Imperial Guard, and Votann. They don't care about any other army in the game because they're only going to be playing against those style armies. So you're able to design an army not worrying about any weaknesses into Death Guard or any weaknesses into, Imperial Knights, for example. Or Chaos Knights, for example, right? So another example of this would be like an Imperial Knight is here specifically to deal with Death Guard. We don't care about how you perform into any other army because we're only going to be sending you into these armies, which allows for very, very interesting and unique builds that would never really work in singles, where you kind of have to be prepared for everything. But most importantly, one of the big things that happens in teams versus singles is that people are playing for the team and not necessarily for themselves. So what is best for the team? Is it best for them to take a big loss instead of someone else taking a crippling loss? So let's say I am playing and the enemy has Death Guard on the table, and we don't have any armies that can play well into Death Guard. We have me and we have someone else. And the other person on my team, they're guaranteed to get 0 points into Death Guard. Whereas my army, I can probably fight and get 4 to 5 points into Death Guard. Well, for the team, it might be better for me to take the 4 to 5 into Death Guard and allow him to go play somewhere else, even though I'm guaranteed to lose the match. It might be better for the team for that. So when you're playing teams, you have to think about what's best for the team and not necessarily just for yourself, which is a very cool thing. So let me kind of talk about matrixing and the way that works. This is one of the things that everyone does in teams. You have to have predictions for how your army does into the enemy armies. So for example, what I've got here displayed for you is, let's say Death Guard Hammer. This is a Hammer of Mortarion, or Mortarion's Anvil, or whatever it's called. I forgot. One of our armies might predict getting a 4 into them, which would be like a 30-point loss. One of our armies might predict a 10, meaning they're going to get a draw. One of our armies predict they get an 8. One of our armies predict they get a 6. Well, that lets our person who's in charge of accepting matchups determine who's going to play Death Guard. Because what's going to be best for us? Is it best for us to get a draw into Death Guard? Or if we take a 4 into Death Guard here, does that give us a big win somewhere else? So this is something that a lot of the other teams are better at than we are at Team Norway. It's something that we really need to improve on, and we're working hard on it, and we will be improved upon it. And this is something that's historically been a weakness for us as well. And it's something that we're going to be a lot better at this year's WTC. We've just typically gotten by on the fact that we have actually very strong players, but our matrixing and our pairing matchups skills tend to be a little bit less than the rest of the world, so we are currently working on improving at that. So pairings, matrixing, team composition, dedicated practice to only a certain few maps. One of the really cool things that we saw when we were talking to one of the other teams, they were top 5 team in the world, is their defenders, or the first 2 people that they put down, like I explained, you have defenders and attackers. These armies, whoever's playing those armies only play on 4 maps, because another part of the pairing of the matching process, which I didn't explain earlier, is that you also have some control over what maps you get to play on. So the defenders get to choose a map. So if you're one or the first or the second defender, basically you're kind of guaranteed to get to play on one of 4 maps. So why would they ever practice on any other map if they're only ever going to play on those 4 maps in competition? So what happens is they get much more expertise at playing on these particular maps, and they're not wasting practice on other maps, which is not something that we've been doing on Team Norway, and this is something that we need to adopt as well. So this is actually a very, very, very cool concept. Very, very cool thing. Now, let's talk about improving in the new season of 40k, some of these lessons we picked up from this weekend. We have to learn nuances of the new primaries. Dealing with challenger mechanics is a very, very big deal, which we're going to have to master. There are new threats with all of the new codexes. For example, we've got a lot of 6-inch deep strike charges, and that's a big threat now. In the last meta, we didn't really need to worry about having our 12-inch deep strike denial bubbles. Now, I think you're probably going to need to see Space Marines bringing back those infiltrators. You're going to start needing to see the enhancements that give the 12-inch deep strike denial bubbles back. It's a very, very big deal. That's going to be very prevalent in the new meta because you have to counter all these new armies that are coming out. There's also a lot of new profiles that you're going to start contending with, and this will be things like the rise of 4-wound infantry, or you're going to have -1 to wound monsters in the form of like your T-Suns, for example. There are new threats that have to be dealt with, and we'll be building out a lot of content for you guys to get you prepped for all of that. This was a very, very interesting thing. So basically what I'm going to do for my follow-up video, I'm going to do a video specifically on some of these styles of armies that you might see in teams, because one of the problems that I happen to see in the meta a lot of times is people will look at a team's tournament and they say, oh, this army did really, really well. X player got 100% against every single opponent he played, but then they go and play it in a singles context, and that army kind of sucks there. So I'm going to kind of explain why these armies work in teams and they might not work in singles. So I'm going to do that for you guys, and I'm going to build some of that out. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. These are some of the things that we experienced and our crushing defeats, and we are going to improve on them so that we can actually smash at the World Teams Championship this year. So if you like, subscribe, share with your friends, all that stuff. Hopefully we're going to get a balanced status late tomorrow or Thursday. I will be going live when that occurs so that we can go through all the newness together and get ready for new points, new balanced status late. I'm freaking pumped. Are you pumped? Let me know, and catch you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye. Crump on.